He thought his tourist pass and a bottle of booze gave him the right to mock a Royal Guardsman. Crossing the line and reaching for the bearskin hat, he pushed too far. When the guardsman stepped forward, halberd in hand, the crowd froze. What happened next silenced the laughter and restored respect for a centuries-old tradition. It was a crisp London morning, the kind that makes the red and gold of a royal uniform gleam with almost supernatural sharpness. The guardsman stood like a marble statue outside Buckingham Palace, a monument to discipline and tradition. His tall bearskin hat and gleaming boots announced centuries of history, yet his immobility and stoic expression were now little more than background props for a modern audience armed with smartphones and selfie sticks. Beyond the iconic white line marking the boundary of respect, or at least where it used to be, the scene was pure chaos. Tourists jostled for the perfect photo, their laughter and chatter rising above the occasional squeal of a child. The guardsman remained unmoved, though inside he might well have sighed. Tradition versus tourism. A battle fought daily, and tradition was losing. Among the crowd, one figure demanded attention. A man in a long gray cloak, topped with a floppy wizard's hat, clutching a suspiciously cheap-looking bottle of what could only be liquid courage. He swayed as he moved, his makeshift staff, a foldable umbrella, clutched like a relic from Middle-earth. "You shall not pass," he bellowed, his voice echoing across the courtyard. The command was directed at no one in particular, but loud enough to turn heads. The crowd loved it. Laughter rippled through the air as phones were raised to capture the performance. "He's doing Gandalf," someone exclaimed, as if the spectacle needed clarification. But the guardsman, not a flinch. His focus remained fixed, his jaw set in silent defiance of the absurdity before him. And yet, within his chest, irritation bubbled, a quiet, seething frustration. This wasn't what the uniform was meant for. He wasn't here to entertain a drunken wizard or serve as a meme generator for the internet. The tourist, emboldened by the crowd's laughter, staggered closer to the line. "Come on, mate, crack a smile," he slurred, waving the umbrella as though summoning the guardsman into his ridiculous charade. "Here we are, folks." Yet another modern-day tourist who believes his ticket stub grants him the right to ridicule centuries of tradition. The tourist, his confidence fueled by the crowd's laughter and whatever was sloshing in his bottle, launched into a full performance. He staggered toward the white line, teetering like a ship in stormy waters, spouting lines from the Lord of the Rings with dramatic fervor. "You shall not pass," he roared again, this time planting his umbrella on the ground as if he were some great wizard summoning ancient powers. The crowd, bless them, ate it up. Cameras clicked, laughter bubbled, and one particularly obnoxious onlooker shouted, "Encore!" The guardsman remained a statue. Not a blink, not a twitch. His restraint was nothing short of Herculean. One could almost hear the collective thought of onlookers who knew better. How does he put up with this nonsense? But the tourist, naturally, interpreted the guardsman's silence as a challenge. "Come on, mate, give us a smile," he slurred, wobbling closer. He raised his phone high, attempting to take a selfie with the stoic soldier in the background. The crowd buzzed with anticipation. "Look, Mom, I'm Gandalf too," a child yelled, imitating the man's antics. The scene devolved into a chaotic carnival of misplaced humor and mockery. And then it happened. The tourist crossed the line, literally. His foot stumbled over the white boundary, and he reached out, one hand aiming for the guardsman's iconic bearskin hat. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some out of disbelief, others eager for the drama. "Back away!" The guardsman's voice cut through the air like a whip. It was sharp, commanding, and filled with the weight of centuries of discipline. The crowd froze, stunned by the sudden shift in atmosphere. For a moment, the tourist looked genuinely shocked, his hand suspended mid-reach. He stammered something incoherent, his bravado deflating like a cheap balloon. Around him, the crowd shifted uneasily, the laughter replaced by awkward murmurs. "Sincerely, mate, did you think this was going to end any other way?" The guardsman's dignity stood in stark contrast to the tourist's ridiculousness, and for the first time, the mob seemed to realize this wasn't a game. The drunken Gandalf froze mid-reach, his bravado vanishing as the guardsman took a deliberate step forward, his halberd gleaming in the sunlight. The air seemed to tighten, the tension drawing an uneasy silence from the once laughing crowd. For a fleeting moment, you could almost hear the tourist's internal monologue. This was not in the plan. But before the confrontation could escalate into a viral guard versus Gandalf showdown, the moment shifted. A small girl, no older than 6, broke free from the throng. Clutching a stuffed unicorn with one hand and wiping her tear-streaked face with the other, she stumbled into the chaos, her wide, frightened eyes darting between the imposing soldier and the commotion around her. The guardsman didn't hesitate. In an instant, his towering figure softened. With calculated grace, he knelt, lowering the halberd and meeting the girl's gaze. His voice, firm yet gentle, carried over the crowd. "You're all right," he said, the words spoken not as an officer of the crown, but as a protector. The girl hesitated, then took a step closer, burying her face in her stuffed unicorn. Slowly, her sobs subsided. The crowd, which moments before had been a cacophony of mockery and amusement, was now silent. Even the tourist, still holding his staff, seemed sobered by the shift. Imagine that, you might think. The man who moments ago saw a uniform as his personal amusement park now realizes it represents something far greater. The guardsman rose, the child's hand still in his, and guided her to the edge of the crowd, where her parents rushed forward with tearful gratitude. He returned to his post with the same stoic precision, brushing a speck of dust from his bearskin hat as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. The onlookers began to clap, not the raucous cheers of a spectacle, but the heartfelt applause of respect. And Gandalf? He stumbled backward, muttering something akin to an apology. Embarrassment clung to him like his ridiculous cloak. His antics suddenly laid bare as the interruption of dignity they had always been. The tourist, now a shadow of his former drunken bravado, lowered his head. His sheepish bow was less a gesture of respect and more a clumsy admission of guilt. It wasn't elegant, but at least he was retreating, melting back into the crowd that had moments earlier been his cheering section. If only this humility had appeared before he tried to turn centuries of tradition into his personal comedy club. And then the applause began. Not for him, of course. The clapping, polite at first, swelled into something heartfelt, directed entirely at the guardsman who had diffused chaos with discipline and grace. For the first time, the crowd wasn't wielding their phones for cheap entertainment. They were moved, reminded of what the uniform truly stood for. The guardsman, unshaken as always, gave no acknowledgement of the applause. His duty was not to bask in glory, but to embody it. With a measured step, he returned to his post, his expression as steadfast as the bricks of Buckingham Palace behind him. But then, in a moment so subtle it could have been missed, a child in the crowd waved, a shy, hopeful gesture. And against all odds, the guardsman responded. Not a wave, of course, that would have shattered the mystique. Instead, the faintest of nods, a crack in the stoic armor, enough to reveal the human beneath. The crowd murmured its approval. It was a rare, fleeting connection between tradition and the people it protected. Somewhere in the back, the tourist was still lingering, visibly torn. His embarrassment hung heavy as he wrestled with the realization. This wasn't just about him. It had never been. Within hours, the scene had spread across social media, stripped of its comedy and reframed as a story of dignity triumphing over disrespect. The Guardsman's quiet heroism became a symbol of the strength in tradition, a beacon against the tide of modern irreverence. Some traditions aren't meant for amusement. They exist to inspire respect. And in that moment, respect wasn't just inspired, it was demanded.